With all due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey. This is a bunch of stuff, deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
Exactly, it is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
No, we
Okay.
Irish call it malarkey.
You know what this is? Yeah, and I reserve this word for those rare instances when it's truly deserved. This is malarkey.
That's a bunch of malarkey.
From the King Spring Studios in Smyrna, Georgia, this is A Bunch of Malarkey. Welcome to the show, everybody. We got a co-host today, Johnny B. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Going to be a great show for you. We're going to kick things off. We had a lot of feedback about last week's show via email, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, about Marianne's ass and the hand blower. So I want to read you some of the comments. I mean, we've doubled our audience over the past week, so thank you so much. For those first-time listeners, thank you so much for joining us. For those who have been back from our last two episodes, we really appreciate you getting the word out. So we want to read some comments from our listeners about what took place last week on the show, where we spoke about me walking in on someone in a public restroom, standing on a folding chair with her bare ass and a hand blower. Amanda says, here's my theory on 1992 Marianne. I bet she used the restroom and something dire happened in there where she got her butt and clothes wet and used a hand dryer to dry off her ass. Thank you for that, Amanda. We also had Trisha comment that, hey, sometimes we just get sweaty down there and need to take care of business. So we have a few theories. But who we have here today, Johnny B. He's a very pragmatic man. He's very sensible, so he's going to be our voice of reason today. We discussed this the other night at dinner, and Johnny B has his own theory on what Marianne was doing in the restroom with the hand blower. So take it away, John. What do you think went on back in 1992?
Well, as I recall, when you explained it to me, you said that this woman was quite short.
Yes.
And I think that you said her butt was quite large.
About 6 axe handles wide.
I would consider that large. So my thought was that I thought of two things. One was, I remember at one time, I think it was my sister, when I went to visit her, had a little sign in her bathroom that said, no job is complete until the paperwork is done. And I thought, well, if this woman was short, she probably had short arms, and maybe she had a problem with the paperwork, and she had a physics problem. And
okay.
So,
interesting scientific take on it.
Yes, and my thought was she probably tried to avoid going to the bathroom at places other than at home, but this time it was an emergency, and the paperwork became a problem.
So my question, though, I see where you're going, but so this was almost premeditated because she got that folding chair before she went.
I think she unexpectedly knew that she was going to have to go to the bathroom, and she knew the paperwork problem was going to follow.
Okay.
And so she got the chair and took care of business, as you would say.
But why would she do that knowing that it's a bathroom where anybody could walk in? It wasn't like it was a single occupancy. Anybody could walk in at any given time.
Well, that makes it a little more problematic. But I think maybe she recognized, emergencies lead to desperate measures. And so I think maybe she thought, there's just a couple of guys in there. They're in the break room. There's probably nobody going to come in here. And I don't have a lot of choice as to where I'm going to go to the bathroom and what I'm going to do afterwards.
So you think the shame of being caught on the chair, the shame of coming out of the bathroom with soiled pants and stuff outweighed the shame of being caught standing on a folding chair, hovering her ass over the blower?
Well, I would think so. And first of all, she probably didn't assume that any guy was going to open the door and see her. So even if a woman walked in, she could, at worst, she just deny she did it.
I know, but what about the actual, interaction? What do you say? I mean, I can't picture myself standing on a chair with my ass in the blower, somebody walking in, and there not be an awkwardness there. You'd have to say something, explain yourself. You don't think that she would have to explain herself?
Well, I'll have to think about what she'd say, but I mean, I was just thinking of.
You took the scientific route.
Well, I just looked at it as a she had a physics problem. Short arms.
Well, in all the 26 years of me telling that story and people who experienced the story, we never heard the scientific end of it. So I'm sure the listeners, and I appreciate it because it was a different take on what could have transpired in that Long Island restroom back in the early 90s, 1992 to be exact. So we thank you, and we hope that satisfies many of the listeners, but we still... If you still think that there is an alternate explanation and you haven't listened to last week's show for whatever reason, go back to last week's episode, take a listen, and then fire away with your comments. So last week we also spoke about my frustration with the pool here in my subdivision, that I'm not able to go in the pool because of all the kids, and it seems as though every week there's some sort of a poop incident in the pool, and with all the kids down there. So we discussed things that take place at public pools and incidents. And John, you told me a story that I had to get you on this podcast to tell about a story that took place. How many years ago was it, John, this pool incident of yours?
Well, it's about 40 some years ago.
So this 40, is you're talking about...
It's when I first...
In the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So
early 70s.
So John had an interesting... incident at a public pool back in the early 70s. So he's going to tell that story, and I think you'll enjoy it. So what happened, John?
Well, Charlie's put me here to really talk about the most embarrassing moment in my life is what this is really about.
That's what malarkey's all about.
Right. So good thing my name on here is just Johnny B.
That's right. Well, we protect your identity.
Well, what happened was this, is at the time I was in my early 20s, and my wife's had a sister who was younger, and she was like probably 13 or 14, and they had come to visit us in the summertime. And I suggested that I could take my wife's sister swimming.
How old were you at the time?
I was probably 22, 23.
Okay.
And we lived in an apartment building that didn't have a swimming pool.
Okay.
But the apartment building next to us did. So I said to Chris, well, what I think we can do is you get on your swimming suit and I'll get on mine, and let's walk over to the apartment next door and we'll just go swimming there. But I cautioned her, act real casual. Act like you belong here. Don't act like we're sneaking in.
So you were casual pool crashers.
Yes. So in the spirit of being very relaxed and very casual, we walk in and she throws down her towel and jumps in the water, and I look around, and there's probably 4, 5, 6 women around with their kids, and they're in and out of the pool, and I'm acting very casual and just...
So there was about a dozen people there, including adults and children.
I'm just talking very nonchalantly, and I take my towel and I throw it down on a lawn chair. And I pull my T-shirt off and I throw it down on a lawn chair, and acting so casual. The next thing I do is take off my swimming suit and I throw it in the lawn chair, and it dawns on me I'm standing there completely naked in front of everybody. And the women's children are going, Mommy, look.
Where did you think you were at that moment?
And Chris is in the water, and she comes up from under the water, looks. I thought she was going to drown. She was laughing so hard. And, of course, then I'm trying to put my suit back on, and my feet are getting caught in it. I'm falling down. So in order to just act like nobody will notice us, then...
So where did you think you were at that moment? Did you have a momentary lapse where you thought you were home getting changed?
I think I must have been so relaxed I thought I was just undressing in my bedroom or something. So who can explain that?
So did any of the parents of those children, the women, say anything to you? What are you doing? Or were they just so taken back by it?
I just remember trying to get Chris out of the water, and the two of us laughing so hard and leaving the place that
Oh, you left. I was going
Oh,
to say, did you
God,
finish
yeah.
the swim?
No way.
So
No way.
so no police were called or anything.
If they were, we were gone.
Well, things are a lot different now, John. Let's say you accidentally did that now. There would be probably a fleet of police cars, exposed yourself to a child. And that takes me back. It's a perfect segue to a true story from Long Island. West Islip was the town I grew up in. And I went to an elementary school that was just a stone's throw away from the Great South Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. Behind the school, there was the typical field where the kids would play, playground, kickball, whatever you wanted to play back there. And at the back of the field was a chain link fence, and there was some woods behind the fence. And it was only about 30 feet of woods, and when you came out the other side of the woods, you were on the causeway, which led to the bridge that took you to the beach, right over the bay and into the ocean. So it was a very small patch of woods behind the school. But every year, recess in the north, school recess, in the fall you would be outside for a while. And then for the winter, they would bring recess indoors because of the snow and the cold up north. So recess in the spring was something we all looked forward to. We would, first warm day, they would open the doors for recess and we would play outside. And like clockwork, John, every year, I would say probably in May when it started getting real warm, at least once a year, in the middle of recess, all kids would start screaming and running away from the back fence. And now you had these teacher aides that were trying to control 100 kids with just a whistle on a lanyard. They would stop blowing the whistles and trying to round up the kids like they were cowgirls, cowboys, and get us into the school. And the reason for this is that kids in the school were claiming that there was a flasher in the woods in a trench coat that would open up the coat and expose himself to the kids behind this elementary school. Now, this went on for years. Every year in the spring, this would take place. And sure enough, the kids would be rounded up, brought into the school, and the cops would show up, pull their cars out onto the field. They would be looking in the back, in the woods, for somebody who was a flasher. But in order for this to have taken place, this flasher would have to pull off on the side of the parkway without being seen in a trench coat in the middle of May on the way to the beach, put his car on the side of the road in the grassy knoll section of the road, walk 30 feet through sticker bushes and all kinds of vines without hurting his privates or whatever that were not covered up by that raincoat, get to the fence, flash kids, then go all the way back through the woods and get in his car and get away before the police came. And I remember the police responding in just a couple of minutes. So we were kind of leery whether kids were making this up or not, since it happened every year. And maybe it was an excuse to, get out of something later on in school. I don't know. But I was at this elementary school from 1976 to 1983. So it happened pretty much every year I was there. And nowadays, something traumatic like that happens to a kid, whether it's alleged or not, whether it's proven, they call a school psychologist into the place. It's a whole lockdown. It's a whole to-do. You know what they did for us? We either went right back to our schoolwork, or they brought in Italian ices from the cafe, free Italian ices to calm us down, because that was the cure-all for just seeing a man's peen in the woods. They asked us, do you want lemon or watermelon? I remember it was those triangle squeeze ices. You peel the top off, and you would just sit there sucking on an ice after just having been exposed to a man's peen in the woods. Now, from 76 to 83, that was kindergarten through 6th grade for me. Then I moved on to middle school, high school, and thereafter. So I ran into a girl in the late 90s who worked for me at a retail job that I had. And she happened to be from the same town. And she was about 7 years younger than I was. So she went to that elementary school up until 1990. And the topic of the flasher came up. And she told me that during her years, from 83 to 90, the flasher was there, flashing people and causing chaos and making everybody run into the school. So I'm like, wow, either this guy's really old and he's scaring people with like a California raisin by this point, or he's passed the raincoat down to his son, and now the grandson took over the flashing responsibilities for West Islip. But that wasn't it. In 2007, I was out at a party with my now wife. We were dating at the time. And we were at a barbecue in, I believe it was Plainview or someplace on Long Island. And we ran into someone who had a child at this elementary school where I went in the 70s and 80s, and where this other girl went up until 1990. And she told me that as of 2007, the flasher was still coming there, and that her kids had to be called in from recess because of a flasher incident. Now, what's the answer to this, John? Either this guy's 100, still showing a California raisin with 2 bowling balls hanging down, or he passed the raincoat on to his son, or now the grandson's doing it. What's your take on this flasher? Is it an urban legend? Is it really happening? Is it copycats? What do you think is happening over in West Islip at this elementary school near the Robert Moses Causeway?
It sounds to me like it's kind of a handed-down myth, except for the fact that you said, I believe you said when you were there, kids actually ran back from the fence. So
yeah, they ran like they saw it, right.
And I don't have an explanation for that unless they just got everybody in on the joke. You know?
I mean, I was outside a bunch of times when it happened. I never saw anything, but maybe these kids knew they were going to get an Italian ice out of the deal.
Yeah.
But the funny part is that nowadays, if something minor happens, like a note, well, you can get an email, a text blast now. We've come so far in technology, but a letter would go out. Back then, they didn't even let the parents know. We'd come home from school, and we'd be eating dinner with my mom and dad. How was school today? Oh, it was good. Kids saw a guy flashing his wee-wee at the fence today in a raincoat. Oh, that's good. How was the spelling bee? It was just like it was no big deal. No big deal. Just move on to the next thing. No parents were notified. If you went home and told them about the flasher, great. If you didn't, no big deal. You just move on with your life. And that's how far we've come with child rearing and child care.
I have a question for you. When you were back then, did you ever tell people that you had seen the flasher or that the flasher had appeared and others had seen it? Or?
No, I never told. I never saw it, so I never told anybody. I never thought that was a badge of honor, saying I saw a man flashing me in a raincoat.
When I was in grade school, what makes me ask that question is when I was in grade school, we had a thing go on in the grade school where kind of all the kids got on board, but the teachers and the principals were not.
Right.
And what happened is we had a couple of guys that went down to the junkyard, used to hang around the junkyard at the end of town. We grew up in a very small town. And they found these little switches that we called clickers, where you could just like a little switch, you'd press it and it'd go click, click.
Right.
And they grabbed a handful of them, brought them back to school. Well, of course, every kid wanted one. Well, within about 2 days, every kid in the elementary had a clicker.
Right.
And it's driving the teachers nuts. So what happened is the principal decided to have a big get-together and call everybody into the gymnasium from the whole school. And she got up on the stage and she's giving this lecture about there will be no more clickers in this school. And if anybody gets caught with any more clickers in this school, we're going to be reporting them to their parents, and there's going to be harsh consequences, and on and on. And I, of course, as a little kid, you're thinking
permanent record.
Yeah, this is like one more step, and you're in jail.
Right.
And so she gets all done, and she's really angry about this. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is really dangerous. And she gets all done and says, "Does anybody have any questions?" And then about 15 clickers went off.
So they were all in on it.
So everybody was in on it. So maybe everybody's been in on the flasher story.
But I want to know, like, how does it originate? What kind of a mind of a child that's 7, 8 years old comes up with a story that, especially back then where there wasn't social media where you could read about or see something in the news, like this kind of stuff really wasn't reported as wildly as it is today and as much as it is today. So I want to know, like, how does something like that originate back then where that's some kind of imagination? Or maybe at one time it really did happen and then it stopped and people just carried on the legend. I don't know. But it's a mystery that has never been solved. And like I said, this went on for years and years. And as of 2007, when I last heard about it, it was still going on. But it's crazy to think that we were given an Italian ice as a remedy for potentially seeing someone flash their privates at us on an open field. There was also a legend that, and a friend of mine, Robert, reminded me of this morning because I had messaged him about this because we were in the same grade in 4th grade, and he said there was also a legend back in those woods that there was a dismembered dog hanging from a tree. So this is kind of getting like urban legendy here. And he said, our biggest fear was when we played kickball, the ball going over the fence, because now someone had to get up and go over that fence, and now you're having to deal with dismembered dogs and flashers, and so who knows where it is. But it's just the difference between the way schools and parents handled things back in the 70s and 80s, and even prior to that, to the way they handle things now. It's like night and day. There would have been a task force there now if this was taking place, and you'd be getting more than Italian ice. They'd probably close the school for a week. There'd be psychologists and psychiatrists in there. It makes me think that nowadays, and you have dogs like I do. We have 3, and you have 3 also. And it makes me realize that people today treat their dogs better than we were maybe treated as children. I don't mean that in a literal way, but you know what I mean. Like, we care more for the mental well-being of our pets nowadays than they did for us back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Don't you agree with that?
Well, I think my thing is that I do agree, and I think that being much older now, I look back and I think that maybe we should say no to our dogs the way people used to say no to their children.
Exactly.
That I personally feel that no is a important thing for people to have in their vocabulary and to use. And I think our relationship with our dogs and other people. I mean, I think we should also say no to ourselves,
Absolutely.
But that's just kind of my own personal feel.
Like my wife, now maybe we had dogs growing up. I had 4 dogs growing up, and I think you had dogs growing up too.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think, and this isn't just, we treated our dogs very well. But I don't think we ever took our dogs to the vet for anything, and neither did my neighbors, because we used to talk, and people I speak to that had pets back in the 70s, and we never took them to the vet for every little thing. If they had something major, of course you would take them, but for these little nuances. And my wife took our dog Cooper, he's a big hound, a couple of weeks ago to some, I don't know what, I don't want to say it was a dog psychologist or dog, I don't know, whisperer, I don't know what the hell.
Shrink.
Yeah, and she comes home. Now, this is how we piss our money away, because we have no kids, so we piss all our money away on... we should have a wing on the vet's office with our name, like in the marble, from all the money we spend at the vet and the dermatologist and the surgeons for these dogs. She comes in and says, I took Cooper to like a dog, I don't know, a herbalist or whatever, like some... I don't know what it was, but she comes home and says... that the psychologist for the dog said that he's experiencing inner shame, and that if he goes to the bathroom on the floor, I should not say anything to him because I'm shaming him. And she sensed this shame inside the hound. When I was a kid, if I felt something, my mother would just say, "Get over it, move on with your life." Like, it was just dismissed. Like, I even was at a point in my life where I think it was 6th grade where I started to squint because I couldn't see the blackboard. And we had the annual physical down at the nurse's office, which was a whole nother story, lining up in your underwear. That was humiliating back in elementary school. But I had the eye test done, and it turned out that I needed glasses. So the nurse wrote a note, and I brought it home. And I said, "Mom, here, this is from the school nurse. She thinks I need glasses because I can't see the board." My mom, instead of saying, "Oh, you should have told me you couldn't see the board," and concerned, "Let's go get the eyeglasses," she reads the note and says, "This goddamn nurse, she's in cahoots with the eyeglass people, and she's going to get a kickback from the lady from the man at the eyeglass store." So we're taking better care. My wife's taking a dog to a psychologist about him feeling inner shame for shitting on the floor, and I couldn't even get eyeglasses back in 1981. So the whole world is upside down nowadays, John.
Well, I've got a similar story. When I was a kid, we had a dog, and I grew up north in a small town, and this dog got a little old, and it got to the point that it could not move its back legs.
Right.
And you'd let the dog outside, and the dog would drag its back legs along, and then if you tried to pick the dog up, it would bite you. But of course, according to my mother, if you tried to help the dog and it bit you, that was your fault,
right,
not the dog's fault. And then
That's a $20,000 surgery nowadays.
right. But her talk about not taking the dog to the vet, the dog couldn't move its back legs for a year, and she treated the dog with aspirin. And lo and behold, after about a year, the dog started walking and could run again.
It's
with
a miracle.
aspirin. So I learned from that, at least as a kid, I could look at it and say, well, at least if I can never walk, my mother will cure it with aspirin.
The only thing I ever saw bought for the dog, our dogs growing up, except for food and water and treats, was my grandfather's dog had some hot spots. He had like allergies, and he used to buy this stuff at the pet store called sulfadine, and he was rub it on the dog with cotton balls. But I have to say, back then, even though we loved our dogs, and we treated them like family, but we didn't go. They didn't all have their own bed. They slept on the kitchen floor near the stove. When it was winter, you heat the stove from dinner, and they felt warmth against the stove. They were treated more like dogs, even though they were part of the family. We never tied them outside or abused the animals, but it's over the top nowadays. The only person back then that I remember being over the top with his dogs was my grandfather, my mom's father. He would feed his dog every morning for breakfast. True story. He would pour him a big bowl of Total cereal. Those flakes, they look like corn or wheat flakes with milk. The dog would have his Total cereal with milk. And then for dinner, every night, he would broil him a hand-pressed hamburger. And it was convenient for when my grandfather was home. But on the holidays, he lived about 10, 15 minutes away from us. We'd have a big Thanksgiving, traditional Italian Thanksgiving, where it was like 7 courses. You'd start with the soup, work your way through the salad, the appetizers, the stuffed mushrooms, the turkey. And then right before dessert, between like the nut and fruit course, he would look at me and says, "Come on, Charlie, we're going to get in the car. We got to go feed Champ," who was his dog, 10 minutes away. We would drive across town between, the nuts and fruit and dessert, go to his house. My grandfather would press him a hamburger, put it in the broiler, and we would wait there for 10 or 15 minutes till that burger was done, and then he would feed Champ the burger, and then we would drive back. So dog food wasn't good enough for his dog for lunch and for breakfast. He had to have Total, and he had to have a hamburger in the afternoon. So that's the only case I remember back then where people were crazy spoiling their animals.
Well, it sounds like he had the exception in that he felt like the animal was equal to or above the humans involved. And I must say, he wasn't the only one, because I got that lesson from my mother. The same dog that had to drag its back feet had a full-sized easy chair in the living room. And I grew up thinking, that all people who had dogs probably had an easy chair in the living room for their dog. And as I remember, as I got old enough to go down the street and cross the street and play and make friends, I remember going into a friend's house, and he had a dog. And he invited me in, and he said, "Have a seat. I'm going to run upstairs. I'll be right back." And I said, "Well, which chair's the dog's chair?" And he looked at me and, kind of like, "What?" And that was the hard way I learned that not every household has a dog chair. And I subsequently, you develop and you learn that maybe the dog isn't more important than me. So.
But now we have 3. You have 3. One of ours that I had for 13 years passed away in April. And so, you get so attached to these animals. You want to do everything for them. My wife and I, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of the things when it comes to like the vets, because I really believe the vets have the dog's best interest in mind to a degree, but they're going to get every red cent out of you, and then they'll send you to a specialist like Cooper's Allergies. We spent a fortune at the vet. After they did everything they possibly could, quote, they send you to the referral dermatologist. Now, I don't know if they get a piece of referral. I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories like my mom with the eyeglasses, but then they drain you at the dermatologist forever, and then finally, when they could do no more, supposedly at the dermatologist, after thousands and thousands of dollars of treatment, they send you to the last resort, which is surgery, and then they hit you with the giant bill. Now, we have pet insurance for all of them, which runs us like $250 a month, believe it or not, for 3 dogs and a cat. But just like people before the Affordable Care Act, if the dog had a pre-existing condition, he's not covered. So when we rescued Cooper from the animal shelter, he had all kinds of problems with his ears and skin, and now those are all considered pre-existing conditions. So he had to have surgery on his ear the other day, $5,600, and it's not covered because he has a pre-existing condition. So we need to get some sort of Affordable Care Act or something for dogs.
I think we need to write to Congressman and say put dogs under the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah, exactly. So we're killing. So we don't see eye to eye when it comes to. I'm all for the care that they need if they need surgery, but my wife goes to these little crazy little psychologists for the dog and stuff like that, and I can't see pissing that kind of money away. We don't see eye to eye. We get along most part, my wife and I, but we don't see eye to eye on a few things. And one of them is, I don't know what it is, like women don't really collect things. Like men have baseball card collections that they refuse to let go from their childhood. Yeah, I don't have a lot of collections. I have some sports figurines, as you can see here in our studio. We have some sports stuff hanging on the walls and things like that I've collected since I was a kid, baseball cards. But I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff since I've been married, just to keep the peace. So we don't see eye to eye on collections. My wife is now reading books on this minimalist, have as little as possible. But meanwhile, Amazon's ringing the bell every day, and I ain't ordering the shit. So I'm reading books on minimalist, but I got the guy ringing the bell every day outside. So I don't know what's going on. So the other day, I was going through some of my old stuff in the closet. I have it all confined to this one room, which we converted into a studio, and it's kind of like, I don't want to call it a man cave. I hate that word, but it's a place where a guy comes to escape, to get his mind off things and don't have to hear crap. So this is my room where my sports paraphernalia is, my DJ mixers, my music, all that kind of stuff. So I'm digging through the closet, and I came across a box that I inherited from my dad when he passed away back in 2009. And in this box is some of his old watches and little keepsakes that I have of his. I have some of his sports memorabilia. And inside this box, I came across what's known as, if you're Catholic, you'll get it. I don't know if it's prominent down here in the South, so you'll have to tell me, John. At funerals, especially Catholic funerals, when you go to the showing, they call it, or the wake, where they lie out the body at the funeral home, then you have like the visitations for a couple of nights before the funeral. You get there and you sign in a book that says, Mr. and Mrs. McMahon were here, so we get credit for coming, and And then you also get a laminated, what they call a prayer card, mass card. It's called all different things, but I think they're called prayer cards. And they're basically Catholic collectible baseball cards. They're laminated, and they have like the picture of Jesus on the front, or Mary, or a saint. And on the back, all they have is the guy or woman's name who passed away, when they were born, and when they passed. And then there's like a religious poem or an Irish blessing. It tells you nothing about the guy. So I stumbled across a bunch of these the other day. And I found one from an uncle of mine, my dad's brother, who passed away when I was 3 or 4 years old. Now, I would love to know more about this guy because I was a kid. He died of cancer when I was 3 or 4. My dad told some stories about him, but I don't know much about the guy. In a box next to it, I've got thousands of baseball cards, and I looked on the back of the baseball card. On the front of the card, I see what the guy looks like, the team he played for. On the back of the card, all stats about his baseball career, even personal stuff. This guy here, Tom Brookins, tells you where his brother played baseball, where he's from, his height, his weight, every stat you can think of. Now, why can't... I know you can probably print these online nowadays, but the ones that from the funeral home, why can't they do something like Topps does with the baseball cards? I mean, I want to know about my Uncle Tom, and all I see is Jesus in front of babies on the front, and a prayer about Jesus on the back, and just the guy's name. I want to see what he looked like. I want to know things about him. So I'm thinking that we can probably jazz up these prayer cards. John, what do you think? What do you think we can put on the back of these to make you really get acquainted with your deceased loved ones?
I'm not sure what you could put on the back, but it raises a question of whether or not you could sell them with bubble gum in them.
Why not? Or like trade and put them in the spokes of your bike. No, but seriously, let's think of some things. Like, what was the guy's favorite song? What was his favorite food? Did he like pizza? Well, when did he have his first girlfriend? His height, his weight, his picture. Yeah. Like more like a trading card. And I think, and the only family I ever saw do this correctly, John, I have it in front of me. I had a gentleman that worked across the street from me a few years ago. His name was James. He worked at a parking lot across the street from the crazy parking lot that I worked at, which is going to be spoken about in my new book, which we'll get to later. But he was an older gentleman, African-American gentleman, and he was great. I love this guy. He would come see me every day. We would talk. We would laugh. And he passed in early 2017. And I really wanted to pay my respects to James, and I decided I was going to go to his funeral and wake. Now, when I walked in, I was given a actual brochure, like you go on Broadway, a playbill. Seriously, look at this thing. It's a celebration of his life. Beautiful picture of him on the front, his birth and death date, the name of the funeral home. And then when you open it up, it's like you've gone to see the show Rent. Everything about this guy, his nickname, where he was employed, who survives him, a prayer and a poem, just like the cards that I spoke about. And then it gives you a whole program of what's going to happen at the service. I was so impressed by this. And then they had music, dancing. I was like one of only like 2 white people in the whole place, but it was fun. I was dancing. I was having a great time over there. This family did it right. And then on the back it says there's a reflection about his life, and the family acknowledging you, everyone for showing up at the service. This was the way to do it. And then I look at these pathetic cards that I have in my box there in the closet, and I'm just we're doing something wrong.
Well, and it's the difference is to me is the brochure that they handed out is personalized.
Right.
The cards are
generic.
They're just formal.
So what do you think you'd add to these cards, or would you just do away with them altogether?
I probably wouldn't have collected them. I mean, maybe there was more that went along with the card.
I don't think so, because I have like my dad's here, then my grandmother's here, and that's all you get.
Okay.
Yeah, I want something more.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously your dad and your close grandparents, you're going to remember all the memories and have other pictures of them and stuff, but like a relative you don't know so much about, it would be nice to have.
Maybe it's changed now.
I went online and I looked, and you can actually have them custom printed on like different sites and everything, and they're a little bit more informative than they used to be. But the ones handed out at the funeral homes tend to generally be the same thing. So my question to everybody out there who's gone to a wake or a funeral and received one of these cards, what do you think they could do to better improve these cards? And what would you like to see on the back? What would you want to know? A stat, something funny about somebody? What do you think they should put on the back of these prayer cards?
Well, and I do think that I've been to a few funerals in the recent past, and I do think at least the funeral homes are talking to the families to see how the family wants to personalize the service.
Right.
And
it's more of a celebration now than it is a sad occasion.
Right. And it's more of a personalized rather than just a formal way of doing things.
I grew up in the wrong era, John.
Yeah,
So, we're on the topic, we strayed a little bit, but we were on the topic which got us to this about things I do where maybe my wife and I don't see eye to eye. The other night, I don't know how many married people go through this after 9-10 years of marriage and beyond, but every night after dinner, I like to have something sweet to eat after dinner. So I'm trying to cut back on all the crap because I put on a few pounds in the last couple of years. I'm trying to lose it again. So I'm trying to cut out the cookies and the cakes and all that stuff after dinner. Except, of course, when we have friends over and we all pig out. But I been buying these frozen fruit pops in the freezer. They're like lemon or not quite like the Italian ices that were given out after the flasher, but they're just frozen fruit on a stick. So every night I get one out of the freezer and I sit in my chair and I watch the ball game. Now, the only way to eat one of these, John, is you can't bite into it. It's like a solid block of ice, so you break your teeth. So the only way to eat this is to, like, suck on it a little bit. And you're going to make a little bit of a noise. It's just normal. the dirty looks and the loud sighs I get from my wife sitting next to me in the next chair, you would think that I was committing some type of, ultimate sin over there in the chair next to her. She hates it so much that sometimes she has to get up and leave the room until I'm finished with that ice pop. Do you believe this? I can't even have an ice pop after dinner without it being a problem. Do you do annoying things like that at home?
Never.
Never.
My wife is probably listening.
No, but things like what out there, we want to hear from the listeners. What things do you do that you don't realize are a big thing that annoys your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner? I didn't think eating an ice pop was that big of a deal.
Well, and I think also is we disguise some things from our mate. Like, for example, my wife has a hard time falling asleep at night.
Right.
I get in bed and I fall asleep mid-sentence. And she's... That's my watch. Sorry. And,
can't find a network connection.
But I fall asleep right away. And I can tell my wife is very polite about it, right. but it pisses her off. Well, by contrast, my wife and I do a lot of mountain bike riding together.
Right.
And I ride as hard as I can up the hill, but she can just blow me away. We get to she waits for me at the top of the hill while she's doing her nails and trying not to get cold. And I get up there and I'm always like, "Oh, you rode so well, honey. It was just it's great to see you ride so well." But also there's that little voice back there going, "Damn, you make me look bad." So I think it's a double-edged sword on a lot of things.
Absolutely. So we made some peppers and eggs today for lunch, John. We got on this kick about, we saw a video the other night about peppers and eggs, and we decided that we were going to have some peppers and eggs for lunch. Now, that's not something you can easily get down here in the South. Up north, you can go to a pizzeria and order a pepper and egg sandwich. So we got to talking about some stuff, things you can get up north that you can't get down here. And I have a hard time in my travels just finding basic things here in the South. I mean, the cuisine is totally different. Sometimes, even though I've been here 7 years, I feel like sometimes I'm in a different country because the cuisine and the culture is so different in the South compared to the North. And I'm sure people from the South that go visit relatives up north have the same problem. I can't find basil. You call a pizzeria and you say, "Give me 2 large pies." And they're like, "We don't sell pies. This is a pizzeria." They think you're asking for like an apple pie or a blueberry pie over here. So you can't, the language when it comes to food is very different in the South than it is up north. What foods do you think are mispronounced here in the South, with a northern dialect? Is there anything that you've had a hard time finding that you miss from your days? I know you've been here a really long time.
Right.
But is there anything that you miss from up north that you wish you could get down here?
Well, not so much now, but when I first moved down here, I did, because my reaction was when I first moved down here, people thought going out to eat was having fried chicken. And that to me was not going out to eat. But also, there was a different, you mentioned the language and the communication. I remember when I was first down here, had a secretary that asked me if I liked bald peanuts. And I said, "What?" She said, "Do you like bald peanuts?" And I thought, I grew up, I ate a lot of peanuts, but I've never seen a bald peanut.
Right.
And then
I'm curious.
And I said, "What do you mean, a bald peanut?" And she said, "Not bald, bald.
Boiled.
A boiled peanut." And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, that's something new. I had never heard of that before I moved to the South. I had never heard of it.
And even when we got it clarified, I still had never heard of it.
They're actually not that bad.
Boiled peanut.
No, the biggest problem I have is being from an Italian family, well, half Italian, is finding good Italian food, and most of which I have to end up making myself. But when you go to an Italian restaurant down here, everything is, well, maybe they're saying it correctly down here. Maybe it's the dialect up north. But you go into a Italian restaurant here, and you say, "Give me some manigot." That's manicotti down here. or everything in New York and New Jersey and the tri-state area, somehow the C's changed to G's. A calzone, a cannoli, regard. Everything's got a G instead of a C. So when you say it down here, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I've been in the store many times, and I forget where I am, and I'll ask for things like that, and I'll get looked like I'm an alien from another planet. So, well, even the word gyro, when you go to the carnivals and stuff, I'll have a gyro, and they look at you, what the hell's a gyro? They call it a euro down here?
Right.
Or, like, what is a euro? I don't know. I guess I have heard euro up north, but it's very prevalent here. But to me, it's always been a gyro.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
I call it a euro.
You son of a...
Because I learned it down here.
You had your first gyro when you came down?
Right.
So that's my frustration with not being able to find basic things down here. Even after 7 years, you start to learn where you can go, where you can't go for things. But certain simple things that you should be able to find at every store. And I'm like I said, I'm sure people that are from here that go visit up north, they can't find, I guess, black-eyed peas and things like that up north. That what's the stereotypical? Well, I'll say the barbecue down here is 100 times better than in New York.
Yeah.
There are good barbecue joints in New York, but basically barbecuing in New York is just taking a slab of meat and throwing it on a grill and saying, shit, I think it's ready, and pulling it off. They don't have the skill with the smoking and the barbecue that they have here in the South. So I will say.
Growing up north, did you ever hear or use the term kin? Like, are you kin, folks?
No.
It was like, are you a relative?
Relative,
right?
yes.
Right. Well, when my son was in high school, he got a job working one summer part-time in a gas station, and his best friend was working there with him, and he told the story that he came home and said that a guy came in the station and was talking to them, and the guy goes, "Are you kin?" And my son says, "No, my name's Dirk, and my friend's name is Carl."
And Barbie's waiting in the car.
Yeah. And he says, No, I want to know, are you kin? He goes, "No, I'm not kin." And
I know, I'd never heard that.
And they finally got it worked out, and finally, I guess the guy said something. "No, are y'all related?" So,
well, even with nationalities here in the South, like when I first moved here, we would ask people, like, what nationality are you? Up north, it's a big thing. You're Italian, you're Irish, you're Jewish, you're German. Everybody, now it's becoming more popular because of these ancestry DNA websites where people are having their DNA analyzed to find out where their ancestors are from. It's now catching on, but this was always a big thing from New York, where I'm from. I mean, you meet a girl and you go out on a date, one of the first questions you ask her is, what are you? Mm-hmm. And they know exactly what you're talking about. Oh, I'm half Italian, half Irish, half this, half that. In the South, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, because we've spoken to people and no, who cares? We don't.
That's right. But one of the things I noticed was a big difference when I came down here is growing up north, I never heard anybody say what county they were from.
Right, right.
Whereas when I came down here, it was like, what county are you from? Like, I'm from such and such county in South Georgia. I'm like, so what?
There's only 100 of them in the state, right?
I mean, if somebody probably asked me in high school, what county do you live in? I probably wasn't sure.
No, I didn't. Well, from where I'm from, there was only 2 counties on Long Island, Suffolk and Nassau, so you pretty much knew where you were from. But it wasn't here. There's 100 counties in Georgia. I think we have the most counties of any state, I believe.
Right, but
I think I read that.
I think it's a carryover from the.
It doesn't matter what your ancestors were. We just want to know what county you're from.
Right. Well, and maybe it's a carryover from the counties had more political say and influence than they did up north. I don't know.
Well, we're just about going to wrap things up. What I want to say is, if you want to join us on social media, if you want to stream us on Spotify, just type a bunch of malarkey into the search engine. If you want to join us on Twitter, it's @MalarkeyPodShow. And on Facebook, just go into the little white search bar and type in a bunch of malarkey. Will come up, or you can type in @a bunch of malarkey pod show. So we do have a release date now for my book, A Whole Lot of Shenanigans, that's going to be coming out. It is October 13th. We read a story from that book last week, and I'll probably be reading another one next week. John, you've got to hear about a dozen or so of the stories, and you're from around here, and you can kind of, understand what I was trying to get across in the book. What do you think of the stories you've heard so far? And you can be brutally honest. If you think it's shit, just
There's not one story that my wife and I have heard where we haven't just belly laughed. And so if you want to have a good day, a light day, and just laugh, it's the answer.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll slip you the few bucks under the table once this podcast is complete for the compliment. I want to read you what's going to be on the back cover of the book. I won't tell you what's on the front cover. I think I'm going to wait till the launch for it. But on the back, it's basically a trailer for the book. Across the top, it says it's an old Irish recipe. You take hundreds of soured court goers, place them in a large parking lot, add one salty parking lot attendant, then mix in generous amounts of tomfoolery, rudeness, laughter, anger, sarcasm, retribution, and spite. Blend all of those together vigorously, and you pressure cook them on high for 2 years. You now have a whole lot of shenanigans. And this contains a full day supply of what John said, belly laughs. So we hope you'll enjoy that. That will be coming out on October the 13th, Saturday. Well, John, thank you so much for sitting in today and being a co-host. Great job. I had a lot of fun. I hope the listeners thought we were amusing.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
And this has been a whole bunch of malarkey. No, not a whole bunch, a bunch of malarkey. I'm getting confused with my book now. A bunch of malarkey. That'll teach me. So join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and you can catch our live feed of this show on Facebook. On the page, we'll be posting the link once we conclude this. So once again, we thank you. We thank John. And we'd love to hear your comments about the show in the comment section of the social media pages. And as I always say, beware. It's a shit show out there. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.